The special guest. It was the day before Christmas Eve, and the city was bustling. The bumper-to-bumper traffic looked like a string of toy cars, and the colorfully dressed shoppers that were spilling over on the sidewalks looked like sprinkles on Christmas cookies. The temperature had dropped, the clouds were gray, and the city huddled together in speculation of a white Christmas. The music pealed forth, the horns blared, and no one noticed the arrival of a special guest who came to accomplish a Christmas mission, and it was just about to begin. Scott Reed was a courtesy clerk at the food crop market, and it had been one busy day. He realized that everybody needed to lay in their supplies because tomorrow was Sunday and the stores would be closed, and the next day was Christmas and the stores would be closed, and he didn't even mind hard work. But as he was wheeling the shopping carts in and out of the grocery store, he sensed a gnawing annoyance. Then he realized what it was. Flashbacks from the accident that happened a year ago today. For what seemed like the 1000th trip to someone's car, he was talking to the customer who happened to be Mrs. Brigglesworth. She used to be a Sunday school teacher years ago, and the way she dyed her hair, it reminded him of blue cotton candy. And she was chatting as they were walking along and said, "And Scott, are you going to come to the live nativity at church tomorrow?" And he said, "Oh yes, ma'am. In fact, I get to be in it. I get to ride the live camel. We drew straws and I won." "Well, how nice," said Mrs. B. "Oh, by the way, how's your sister doing?" And immediately he felt his stomach muscles tense, and he said, "She's just the same." "Oh," she said, "well, I had a dream that she totally got well." "Well, that would be really nice," said Scott, "but after this year, I don't hold much hope for that." And as he was wheeling the baskets back to the store, he came upon a mint-condition, beautifully well-kept old Packard. He just had to have an admiring glance. He said, "What would that guy say if I drove up in a classic like this to school?" And then, just as he was about to re-enter the grocery store, he noticed on the outdoor cafe, sitting there in the cold, reading a book, an older gentleman. He had a red vest and an overcoat and a kind of grandpa kind of hat. He had white hair and eyebrows that looked like bushy cotton. But was he crazy or what? Reading a book out in this kind of cold? So every time Scott went in and out of the grocery store, he glanced over and the man was still there. Well, it was dark now, and the store would be closing pretty quick, and so out of concern and curiosity, Scott went over to the man and said, "Excuse me, I've been noticing you over here. Do you need some help?" He said, "Well, if you can fix that Packard over there, yes." "Oh," he said, "that's yours? It's a beaut. How old?" 1949. He said, "I call her Charity. She's a really good car. Whenever she gets a little tuckered out, I just let her rest and then start back up again. But this afternoon, she doesn't want to start back up." "Well," said Scott, "I don't know much about cars, but my dad does, and he's going to come and pick me up from work in a little while, so maybe he could help you." "Oh, I'd be so grateful if that was the case. Don't you want to come inside? I mean, it's cold out here." He said, "Oh, no," he says, "I'm just so wrapped up in Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. It really gives me perspective on what Christmas is all about." "Well, okay," said Scott. "Oh, by the way, my name's Scott Reed." And Zachary said, "My name's Zachary." Well, a little bit later, Max drove up in the Reed family van, and Scott ran out and told him about Zachary and the car Charity and the need there. And he said, "Well, let's just go take a look." And so as they were walking across the parking lot to meet Charity, Dad went, oh my goodness, I've never seen a classic like this. Mind if I give it a try? And he got in and he started it up and it went, well, check the spark plugs, check the battery, that all looked good. And so Max said, well, you know, without further diagnostic instruments, I'm not sure that I can do anything to help you today. And things are going to be pretty buttoned up here with Christmas on Monday and, of course, everything closed on Sunday. So I don't think you're possibly going to get any help until Tuesday. But if you need a place to stay, we've got an extra room. He said, oh, couldn't possibly come in on you at Christmas time. And Max said, why not? Just come and spend Christmas weekend with the Reed family. And before you know it, Zachary and a suitcase were piled into the van and they were arriving at the Reed's house. Scott jumped out and ran in and said, hey Mom, we got company. And she said, well, that's good. I'm sure you'll be welcome here. What's for dinner? And he went and he lifted the lid and went, yum, chili, I can eat the whole thing. I am starved. Well, I met Zachary at the market, and his car, Charity, isn't working, and so Dad and I invited him for Christmas weekend. And 10 minutes later, they were having their chili supper. So Ellen Reed said, so Zachary, what brings you to Richmond? He said, well, I'm on a special assignment. I work for a charity organization. We help people with their, maybe getting jobs, maybe financial problems, maybe even family problems. Whoa, said Ellen, who pays for all these services? Oh, our benefactor says he insists on remaining anonymous. Every case is different. I just travel a lot, and then each one got their challenges. Why, today I just came in from Missoula, Montana. Scott said, you drove Charity from Montana? He said, yeah, she's really a pretty good car, usually. Well, said Ellen, I'm sorry about Charity, but I don't think she's going to get much attention because tomorrow's church, and then tomorrow night's the live nativity at church, and then the next day's Christmas, and Charity's just going to have to wait her turn, it sounds to me like. And Zachary said, oh, tell me about the live nativity. Scott, our son, is in it. We were pretty proud of that. He gets to ride the camel. Oh, says Zachary, how'd you learn to ride a camel? I says, oh, riding Penelope's not much. There's not much to it. The trainer just told me that if I would just act like I'm in a rocking chair at the same time I'm riding, it all would turn out fine, and it does. Oh, and then Ellen said, Scott, why don't you tell Zachary about winning second place in the essay contest for the Richmond Times? Oh, said Zachary, yeah, tell me what you wrote about. I wrote about an accident where it involved a drunk driver and my sister. Happened a year ago today. And my sister was hit on the head and she's been unconscious ever since. Oh, I'm sorry, said Zachary. Is she still in the hospital? No, they couldn't do anything more for her, so they let us bring her home. And she looks just like she's just sleeping, but she's been looking like that for a year. And then at the accident, what about the driver? Oh, said Max, Scott saw the whole thing. Oh, it should have been me, said Scott. I just feel so bad that it was my sister and not me. And both parents said, Scott, we've tried to tell you, it's not your fault. Well, what happened, said Zachary? Oh, he hit a tree and he came out without a scratch. And here our whole daughter's life is ruined. Said Zachary, don't you think that man's life is probably ruined too? He just got 6 lousy months in prison. And look at this, our daughter, her whole life. Have any of you ever talked to him? They looked at him like he had lost his marbles. What would we have to say to him? Well, like it or not, you are connected because of the accident. And I doubt that the time in prison has helped him absolve his guilt feelings any more than you have been able to resolve yours. What is needed here is an act of forgiveness on your part. It's quiet around the table as everybody got up. And And Scott helped take some of the dishes to the kitchen and watched his mother dish up apple pie and said, "Mom, how come we never talk to Jake, right? Jake Fincastle." "Because we were so angry at the unnecessary pain that he caused for all of us." Scott said, I know, I have hated him myself. And there has been such a gloom over our house for this whole year. I wonder if Zachary might be right. Maybe we should go to the prison and tell Jake how we feel and forgive him. And Ellen went over and took her son's face in her hands and said, "Son, sometimes I wonder where we got you. You are absolutely right. Let's go see if your dad will go." So they went, and after some discussion, it was decided they would go to the prison after church tomorrow. The next morning, Zachary was asking Ellen how she took care of Jenny. "Well, we don't know if she's just going to be in a coma the rest of her life or that someday she just may wake up." So they said, the doctors told us, just treat her as much of the part of the family as possible because comatose patients can often hear. And so we read to her, we sing to her, we play music, we involve her in as much of the family life as possible. "How do you feed her?" said Zachary. "Well, we spoon feed her because swallowing is a natural reflex." Ellen said, "Zachary, I've seen many tragic situations just like yours, and I have found that the way people deal with them is the really important thing. And you're going to have a chance this afternoon to experience that when you visit Jake." "Oh, I know," said Ellen. "Last night I was just tossing and turning all night long. I'm so worried about this visit. My heart tells me it's the right thing to do, but my head said it's not so sure." Zachary said, "That's probably normal. But how do you think Jake feels facing all of you?" The trip to the prison was mighty quiet in the car. And when they got there, it took a long time to get processed to be sure that they could go to the visitation area. And when they sat down, they saw a very slight man with deep crevices in his face coming toward them, almost as if he was carrying a toolbox that was too heavy to lug. And he came and stood in front of him and just stared. Max said, "Jake, I'm Max. This is my wife, Ellen. This is our son, Scott. And this is our friend, Zachary." Jake didn't know what to say. So he just went. "The reason we came," said Max, "is because we wanted to tell you how sorry we were for what happened. And to tell you we want to get it behind us. And to tell you we're sorry for how it ruined your life, too." Jake began to shake, and his shoulders were heaving, and he just flopped into the nearest chair, and he put his face into the hands, and he started to weep. "I thought you would hate me for what happened." "We have," said Max, till Zachary helped open our eyes. "We were bitter and we didn't even know it. And we came here today to make things right between you and ourselves." "I've never met people like you," said Jake. "When I first got to prison, the chaplain told me how Jesus could forgive my sins. And oh, what a wonderful relief that has been. And ever since then, I prayed every single day for your daughter. I wanted to write and see how she is, but I didn't have the nerve. How is she? I would have rather killed myself than have hurt your little girl. And Ellen said, we can see that on your face, Jake. If only I could relive that day. I had just been laid off after 11 years of work, and I just didn't know how I was going to meet the needs of my family, and let alone get stuff for the kids for Christmas. And I didn't know then about going to God for help. So I went to the bar, and you know the rest of it. Is there any way that you could forgive me? And the three Reeds looked at each other, and quickly and in unison said, yes. Jake said, really? He had a light bulb look. Really? He said, yes. I would give anything if God would heal your little girl. Max said, we would too. Jake, how's it going for your family? Oh, they're making it. My wife took an extra job at Walmart just to make ends meet. It's been hard, but they're making it. Jake, said Ellen, could we bring them a Christmas meal? Oh, you don't have to do that. We want to do that. Scott said, I've got an idea. Let's invite the Fincastles to the live nativity at church tonight. Great idea, said Mom. What do you think, Jake? Well, I'll have to ask my wife, but we don't have a car. No problem, said Max. We'll stop by and pick him up. So Jake went out to call his wife, and Zachary came over and said to the three Reeds, are you satisfied with how things are going? When Jake came back, he looked like a different man. He was walking up straight, and he actually had a smile on his face. And he came and said, they actually do want to go. And my wife said the kids have been begging to do something for Christmas. So Max said, it's a deal then. And as Zach and Jake were shaking hands when they left the prison, Jake said, I don't know what you did to bring these fine folk here today, but it was wonderful. And Zach said, you're on the right track, Jake. Things are going to be looking up. And when they got to the car, Max went, phew! I feel like a ton has been taken off of my shoulders. Zachary was right. They dropped Scott off at the church for the live nativity rehearsal, and Zachary stayed with him, and Max and Ellen went home and worked as fast as they could to get a meal together to take to the Fincastles when they were going to pick him up to bring him to the live nativity. When they first got there, they were very shy, and you got to admit, it was a bit of an awkward situation. But Max pulled out some candy canes and got the kids in the van. And they, before you know it, were arriving at the foyer of the church. And Zachary met him right there. And he was just talking to the kids like he knew them. And Max thought, how come he knows their names? Oh, well, never mind. Zachary had saved the whole front pew so they wouldn't miss any of Scott's big debut on the camel. And the pastor took the scriptures and opened to Luke 2. And when he got to the part about where the angel makes the announcement, the Fincastles sat there with their mouths wide open, because the angel making the announcement was on a guide wire hanging between there and there, and they couldn't believe their eyes. And the angel said, fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which will be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. And then it got to be time for the wise men. The first two came in on those sedan chairs, you know, the ones carried on the poles and the shoulders of the foot servants. And then it was time for Scott. Oh, he had a gorgeous gold turban and a beautiful robe that went way back all over Penelope. And he came down the aisle in a perfect rocking chair ride, and Max and Ellen were so proud they were going to burst their buttons. And the Fincastles were in awe. And Ellen and Jake's wife were walking to the car afterwards, and Jake's wife said, "Thank you so much for inviting us. I have never seen the story of the Nativity so real as tonight." And when they got to the Fincastles' house, what do you think? There on the front porch were two enormous bags, and everybody had something to say about it. Well, all B. Who do you think brought them? What do you think's in them? I can't imagine. And the Fincastles tumbled out of the van and went to see, and inside were gifts for everybody with their names on it. Yahoo! The Fincastle kids were dancing for joy on the porch as the Reeds drove away. And when they got home, Ellen immediately went into Jenny's room and told the nurse how fabulous Scott had been on the camel and how mysterious it was that there were packages on the Fincastles' porch. And the nurse said, "Well, there have been some interesting things happening around here, too." "Oh?" "Well, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I saw Jenny make some sounds and motions and movements that I hadn't seen before." "Oh, do you suppose she's thinking about coming out of her coma? Well, let's call the doctor." The nurse said, "Why don't you just wait and let's see what happens. Just observe." "Oh, and your friend, your guest, Zachary, right? Well, he stopped by this afternoon to spend some time with Jenny. And he's an amazing man. He knows the names of all the doctors and all the nurses in the pediatric ward at the hospital that I used to work at before I moved to Richmond. He's quite a special guest." After the nurse left, they had hot chocolate around the fireplace. And they decided to tell Scott. Now, don't get your hopes up, because we are not at all sure, but just maybe, Jenny might be starting to come out of her coma. This is what the nurse that was staying with her observed. Scott said, "I wonder if it had anything to do with the fact that we went and visited Jake." "How so, son?" said Max. "Well, maybe God was waiting for us to forgive Jake so he could heal Jenny." "Well, all I know for sure," said Zachary, "is when we left that prison, that was one changed man." "Oh," said Max, "we were all changed." And Scott said, "I wasn't." "Oh, Scott, you're still carrying the responsibility of this accident on your shoulders, aren't you? You just can't forgive yourself?" All I could think of is, why did I take Jenny on such a busy street right after we took her training wheels off? Oh, I wish it had been me. All year, every time I think about it, I know it's my fault and I can't get rid of that thought. And he walked over to the fireplace, and Max walked over and put his arm around him and said, "Son, things are out of our control. We actually have to just let them go. The exact same thing could have happened if I was there." "Really? Really? You mean it really isn't my fault? Are you sure?" And Scott was crying and Max was talking to him. So Ellen suggested that Zachary come over here and look at the Christmas tree, because there was a bell collection on it. It was one that her grandmother passed down to her, and she had passed down to Jenny. Get her a new one every year, you know. And she said, "We didn't get her one this year." Zachary said, "This has been a really tough year for you, hasn't it? The worst in our lives." Well, Max and Scott rejoined them, Scott wiped away his tears, and Max said, hey, I think it's time that we do our Christmas Eve tradition of everyone opening one gift. Come on, let's get some up from under the tree. And Scott said, why don't we go in Jenny's room to open them? And so they all piled in there. And the first one was the nurse had brought a gift for Jenny. It was a beautiful pillow with ribbons and lace and stuff. And so Max lifted Jenny up so Ellen could smooth the pillow behind her, and they set her back. She looked real pretty. And then Scott opened a fabulous pair of hiking boots that he was going to use for a backpacking trip this summer. And he was pretty happy with those. And Zachary got 3 jars of homemade preserves from Ellen. And Scott's gift to his parents was an envelope of cash. And a note that said, you haven't been able to get away for a whole year. Take this to do that, and I'll help the nurse with Jenny. Oh, son, they were hugging and kissing him and saying, you are amazing, so thoughtful and generous. Your hard-earned dollars. Thank you, thank you. Couldn't find a better son anywhere. And then it was about time to go to bed, so Zachary said, well, if you don't mind, I'd like to just stay here by the fireplace and finish my book. No, that's fine. And Scott started up the stairs, but then he changed his mind and he went and sat down beside Zachary in the fireplace. Zachary, did you have anything to do with those gifts on the Fincastle's front porch? He said, why, heavens, are you asking that of me? He said, well, I noticed that you left from the rehearsal for the live nativity for a little while, and I was just putting 2 and 2 together. Oh, he said, I was probably borrowing somebody's phone to call my home office. Oh, okay, so Zachary, I just thought I'd ask. Zachary, I was dreading this weekend. Since you came, everything changed. Zachary, I'm so glad you came. Zachary finished reading his book, went over and roused Scott and said, hey, bud, would you like to read my book? Huh? Oh, yeah, sure. And he took it and went upstairs and did that, and he never remembered doing that. The next morning, everybody overslept. Well, it had been quite a day the day before. And then Ellen went and roused Scott and said, hey, son, don't you know what today is? Oh, it's Christmas! And he bounded out of bed down the stairs to the Christmas tree, and there it was, a whitewater one-man canoe. Yahoo! He said, exactly what I wanted. Mother said, why'd you go up and get Zachary so he doesn't miss out on all the fun? And he bounded up the stairs 3 at a time, knocked on the door, and no answer. So he went inside, and he found a note for him and a gift for Jenny. He couldn't wait to see what Zachary had told him. Dear Scott, on the outside chance that charity will start, I'm taking an early leave. There's a client I need to visit in West Virginia before Christmas Day is over. Please give my heartfelt thanks to your parents for their gracious hospitality. And please keep my copy of Dickens' book as a reminder of our Christmas weekend together. Your friend, Zachary. Mom, Dad, Zachary's gone. But he left me a note, and he has a present here for Jenny. Let's go to Jenny's room. Let's open it. I can't wait to see what he got her. And so they quickly all assembled in Jenny's room, opened the gift, and it was a beautiful bill. Now, how did Zachary know she had a bill collection? Ellen said, well, I told him about it last night when I was showing him the Christmas tree, but there is no way on God's green earth he could have shopped after that conversation. Scott got an idea, and he went over to Jenny, and he put it right by her ear and said, listen, Jenny, listen. Listen, Jenny. said, "Is something wrong? Jenny, don't you remember anything?" "Yes. I was at a park and I was swinging, and there was a really nice man there. And he pulled out a pocket watch, and he looked at it and he said, 'It's time to go.' And he walked me home, and here I am in bed. Have I been dreaming?" And Scott said, "What did the man look like?" "Well, he had on a red vest and an overcoat and a kind of grandpa kind of hat, and he had white hair and eyebrows that looked like..." And Scott said, "Bushy cotton." And Jenny started to giggle. Bushy cotton, that's what they looked like. And Max said, "It had to have been Zachary." Scott said, "Look, it's snowing. We got our white Christmas after all." Jenny said, "Christmas? Is it Christmas?" And she said, "Never mind. Who is Zachary?" And Ellen went and got her Bible and opened it to Hebrews and read, "Don't forget to be kind to strangers, for some who have done this have entertained angels without even realizing it." Scott jumped up on Jenny's bed and said, "Little sister, have I got a story to tell you about our Christmas special guest. Celebrate with me that those of us who have decided to be in God's forever family are on the radar of a whole brigade of angels." Amen.